All right, welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep into something I think a lot of you out there really want to understand. The NBA salary cap, and especially how these new apron rules are making things, well, a little crazy for teams when they're trying to get those star players.
Yeah, it's a whole different ballgame now. You can't just, throw a ton of money at every player you want. Even if you are ready to pay that luxury tax, it's not that simple.
No, not at all. We've been spending some time with the 2023 collective bargaining agreement, all 600 pages of it.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, it is intense.
Dense, for sure. But it's also, super interesting because it really lays out how the entire league works. Everything starts with what they call basketball-related income.
BRI.
BRI, right,
Yeah.
the foundation of the whole thing. So that's basically every dollar the NBA and all the teams bring in, right?
Yeah.
We're talking ticket sales, those massive TV deals.
Oh, it's way more than that. I think 50% of the money from those huge arena signs, a cut of luxury suite sales, even a percentage of what teams make from those crazy expensive courtside seats. Wait, hold on. Only 50% of arena naming rights. I was looking at that part in the CBA, and it seems kind of, random.
Well, there is a reason. The agreement tries to only count revenue that's directly tied to how well the players perform and how popular they are. A big arena name might bring in some fans, sure, but not just because of who's on the court,
Yeah, that makes sense. So they basically split that with the owners.
Yeah.
But how do we get from BRI to an actual salary cap number? Can't just be like a random guess, right?
Nope, there's a whole formula, and it's really detailed. The salary cap has to be 44.74% of the projected BRI for next season. And they estimate that based on what's happened in the past and how they think things will grow. Then they also subtract out any benefits they project they'll have to pay to the players.
So almost half of all that money ends up going to the players. But even with this huge salary cap number, there are ways teams can exceed it, right?
Absolutely. And that's where the exceptions come in. You've got things like the mid-level exception, the biannual exception, the rookie exception, and the traded player exception. Each one lets teams go over the cap, but only under certain conditions.
Like a loophole almost.
Yeah.
A way to add talent, even if you're technically over the limit. I think the mid-level exception is really interesting. So let's say a team's already over the cap. How could they use that to sign someone?
Okay, picture this. A team has a few big contracts, puts them over the salary cap, but they still need, a really solid role player to make the team work. The mid-level exception lets them offer a contract at a certain value, even if they're over that cap.
That's pretty smart. It helps keep teams competitive, even if they have some big contracts to deal with. But I have a feeling it's not quite that easy. This is where those aprons come in, right? It sounds like they could really tie a team's hands.
You're right on the money. If you go over the tax level, which is already above the salary cap itself, that triggers the first and second apron levels. It's basically like a stricter limit. And each level has tougher penalties. They're trying to, keep spending under control and stop teams from just going crazy with their payrolls.
I'm already getting stressed just thinking about it. So how do they even calculate the first and second apron levels? It all seems pretty complicated.
All right, let's break it down. Straight from the CBA, the first apron level this season is set at the tax level, plus $106 million, with an adjustment based on any change in the salary cap. So, for example, if the salary cap is, say, $134 million, the first apron would be almost $170 million.
So as long as the team keeps their total payroll under that $170 million, they have a little more wiggle room. What about the second apron? Where's the line there?
It's a bit different. This season, it's the tax level, plus a flat $17.5 million. So using that same salary cap number, $134 million, the second apron would be around $180 million.
Got it. So once you cross into those apron levels, especially that second apron, things start to get really restrictive, right?
Yeah.
What kind of penalties do teams face?
Let's talk about that. Let's unpack all those limitations. First up, those valuable player exceptions. When you go over those aprons, it really hits you when you need to add players. If you're over that first apron, you can't use the biannual exception anymore. That's a pretty big deal, You could miss out on a really good role player because of that.
So you have to make every spot on that roster count. It's not just about having the money, it's being able to actually use it.
Exactly. And it gets even tougher the further you go. Once you cross that second apron line, it's a whole other level.
Let's hear it. What happens at that second apron?
Well, one of the biggest things is you lose the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. Remember how we talked about using that to sign a good player even when you're over the cap? Yeah, you can't do that anymore at the second apron.
Wow. So if a team has a high payroll and they need to fill a spot, Like mid-season?
Mm-hmm.
They're out of luck.
Basically. You also lose the biannual exception, and you can't even use a regular traded player exception if you got it after the season started.
Wait, so if you're above that second apron, you can't use some of the most normal ways to add players.
That's right. Your options get super limited. And it's not just signing free agents. Trades get harder, too.
What do you mean? I would think if you have the money, you could at least make some trades.
Not so easy. When you're above that second apron, you can't offer any cash in a trade. Like, sometimes teams use cash to convince another team to take a bad contract, but you can't do that.
So they're really taking away all the tools, huh?
Yeah.
You're stuck with what you've got.
Pretty much. Oh, and there's one more thing I haven't mentioned. Buyout players. You know, when a player and a team decide to go their separate ways and he becomes a free agent.
Yeah, that happens all the time. Sometimes a veteran wants to try for a championship or a young player wants a new start.
Right. But if you're above that second apron, you can't sign any buyout players if their old salary was above a certain amount. So you're basically shut out from all those players.
Man, they really do box you in with these rules. It sounds like exceeding that second apron could really mess things up. Like what if there are injuries or you need to shake things up mid-season?
It makes things interesting, that's for sure. Teams have to think really hard about what each contract means in the long run. They aren't just building a team for one season, it's for the future, too.
It's like a super high-stakes chess game, and one bad move can set you back years. But some teams have figured out how to make it work, right?
Absolutely. There are teams that stay competitive without getting hit by these apron penalties. And then there are the teams that went all in and ended up stuck because of the restrictions.
Okay, so what's their strategy? How do the successful teams avoid this? What separates them from the teams that end up in, like, salary cap jail? So we've seen how these apron rules can really limit what a team can do, but some teams seem to do just fine even with all that. How do they do it?
It's all about drafting the right players, making smart trades, and really squeezing every bit of value out of the money they spend. The teams that stay under the aprons, they're really careful about everything they do.
They can't just go after every big-name player who wants a huge contract.
Yeah.
They have to be strategic, building that core group of players through the draft, finding those hidden gems that maybe other teams missed.
Exactly. And when they do spend big on a star, they really watch how much they're spending on everyone else. They get it, you know. One bad contract can push you over that apron line, and then you're stuck for years.
It's a long game, not just about winning right now. They're thinking about how what they do today affects them in the future. You know, like, can they build a team that can win a championship down the road?
And sometimes you got to make tough calls, like letting go of a player that the fans love, or saying no to a player who seems like he would fit in just because the money doesn't work with their plan.
It's crazy how these apron rules have turned the salary cap into a whole puzzle. Teams have to stay ahead of it, you know, planning for different things that might happen.
And don't forget about the players. They know about these rules too. They're agents too. It changes how they negotiate their contracts. They know that a team that's already paying a lot in luxury tax might not be able to give them as much money or as long of a contract.
So a player might choose to play for a team that has more room under the cap, even if another team that's close to that second apron offers them a little bit more money. It's about the future and playing for a team that can win.
It's all connected, you know? The salary cap, the apron rules, the decisions players make, the team's strategies, it all comes together and shapes the whole NBA.
And like we've been talking about, you have to understand all of this to really get how teams are built, why they make the moves they do, and who actually has a shot at winning it all.
Yeah, it adds a whole other level when you hear about trade rumors, players signing with teams, all that. It's like a code that tells you what's going on behind the scenes.
So next time your team does something, don't just look at the player's stats or highlights. Think about the salary cap, these apron rules, what the team is trying to do in the long run.
You might be surprised by how complicated it is and how smart or how dumb the teams are being with all of this.
Well, I think we've covered a lot today. We've gone deep into the NBA salary cap, those tricky apron rules, and how they affect a team's ability to bring in new players. Hopefully, you all have a better understanding now of how this whole thing works.
And maybe you even have some respect for those guys in the front office who have to deal with all this money stuff while also trying to build a team that can win a championship.
It's a tough job, no doubt. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to check out the show notes for more info. And until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, keep diving deep.